Hey, folks. Welcome.
Hi,
We'll get
everybody. We looks like we're still climbing in numbers a bit, so we'll probably just give it a couple minutes just to let everybody get a chance, and then we'll get started. All right. Sounds like you can hear me, but you can't see me. So
Yeah, that's correct. I can move my
let
mouth
me
while you talk. How about that?
let me just do a refresh and make sure.
Okay.
1 second. Thanks for your patience, everybody.
Welcome, everyone. We'll get started here in a minute. We're working through just a little bit of a technical thing here at Fusion, and so we'll get that done here in just a second. Here we are. Hey, Mandy.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Hey.
All right, sounds good. Just had to take a quick
detour.
Take me out. Glad it's happening now.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think that it's kind of plateauing in numbers here. So let me just try to reshare my screen here, and then we can go ahead and get started.
That sounds like a plan.
All right. How's my screen looking?
Looks good. Looks good.
Okay, great. You can see it? All right. Well, let us know if anything happens in the meantime. So great. We'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody, or night or morning, depending on where you're tuning in from here. We're very, very excited to talk today about doing scenario testing smarter and how to be able to use AI and data science to do testing more effectively, efficiently, and in greater detail here. So before we get started, just a little bit of what we're going to go through today. We'll do some introductions. We want to talk a little bit then, again, why testing matters, more than just a check the box exercise. We're going to go over the 4 kind of widely accepted phases of scenario testing. And for each one, we're going to go back and forth between kind of what they are, what the current challenges posed for many of the organizations we see, and then as well as offer a perspective here on how AI and data science can transform each phase. So we'll do both of those organized by phase of testing. Here is going to talk a little bit about the importance of data. And then we'll have some time for Q&A. So on that note, if you have any questions throughout, feel free to pop those in the chat, and we'll have time at the end to answer those, as many as we can live for you. Also, this will be recorded and available for you. So if there's anything you want to go back and revisit, you will have the opportunity to do so here. So just to kick off and get started. So I'm Mandy Leavell. I'm a senior product marketing manager at Fusion Risk Management, based here out of Chicago. I've been at Fusion for about 2.5 years. And a lot of the work I've been doing has been bringing kind of scenario testing, AI, and other related capabilities to market. And I'm joined with the incredible David Halford. I'll let him introduce himself. David, I think you might be on mute.
There you go. We're having
Sorry,
really fun.
sorry,
We're having really fun today, right? So I'll start all that over. I'm David Halford, and Mandy and I are really excited to be here with you guys, regardless of all the techno stuff we're having fun with. We are both from Fusion Risk Management, and we have nice working and really positive relationship with DRI. Enjoy being with them, enjoy doing things together. So we're thankful for the opportunity to be together with this audience and in partnership with DRI. As I'm VP of Continuity Solutions, I've been with Fusion Risk Management about 10 years now. I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary, and my background, and this will come out during some of our discussions, and certainly if I get an opportunity to talk to any of you at a upcoming DRI conference, I'd love to. I'm a practitioner by heart. I've been in the industry for let's just say a long time, 25 plus years, and most of that has been as a practitioner. I've spent a number of years as a consultant assigned to different accounts and things, and for the last several years I've been a part of our product organization, really trying to make sure that our product meets what customers need it to do. So you'll see that kind of coming out in me is from a practitioner point of view, and have done this and doing this with different customers. So look forward to sharing that with you guys, and again, opportunity to answer any questions through the chat around practical things and things that we might bring up today while we're talking. Mandy, I think next we're going to do a poll. Is that right? Do I got the order correct? Yeah.
That is true. Yep, our first poll here.
So Jeff, if you would, go ahead and let's put a poll up. This is the first one, and it looks like it's started. So if you'll just in the app, if you'll go over to the polls and look at those, but basically we want to know how many exercises or tests that you do a year on average, and that you're performing. So we'll give that a couple of minutes here. We've got looks like about 45% of the audience, and I think you all can see the results as they're coming up. But high percentages in the 1 to 5 category, which is to me a little interesting to the numbers, and that would imply to me that they're larger events, they're larger activities, if that's the number that it's getting. So that's going to be my implication. I see some that are higher numbers there. Okay, I think we've
yeah, it's interesting. It looks pretty evenly split except for that 1 to 5.
Yeah, that's good. Well, thank you team, and thanks for giving us that feedback. I think the next thing we want to move to is really just kind of a reminder of the importance of testing, and why really scenario testing matters. Are we going to move? If you would, Mandy, if we could move to the next slide, please. So, really, why do you do this? And I think it's important that we kind of connect the dots between what do we mean by scenario testing and what is it impacted to you. And clearly the concept of a scenario test, both regulatory as well as from inside a company, is really thinking of that plausible, realistic, plausible event that might impact your business. It needs to be plausible for it to actually show up and have meaning to you, in my perspective, but yet we want to apply as much severity to it as we can. The goal and the output of that is not always to just pass or fail. It's actually to identify gaps and understand responsibilities before an event actually happens. We want to validate the strategies that we've put in place. And what we mean by strategies, what I described there, are the plans and the activities we have decided to do: move to an alternate location, do a failover of the technology. Those are the concepts of strategies that we want to validate meet your business requirements, and of course build confidence with your management team, with stakeholders. We want to you really have to ensure that what you put in place is going to enable you to recover. And the more confidence you can put in place, the better, obviously, everything works. It kind of goes hand in hand with the concept of muscle memory. Why do you exercise sort of anything? in this example, it's really the concept of in a real high pace situation, you're gonna there's quite a bit of opportunity to fall back on muscle memory. We like for you to think about following your checklist and following what you've defined and to be sure you don't miss things. If you've ever flown on an airplane or watched a pilot get ready, they do this every day, but they go down a checklist to be sure that they've completed the things that are necessary before they take off. And that's the same thing we think of. But muscle memory is still clearly an important item so that it becomes more natural to you. So those are really the things that we tie together. Obviously, I've talked about the regulatory compliance, but the capabilities really are. It's important that you go through and do that, and that's the reason we're bringing this out today. Let's do another poll, and then what we want to know. A minute ago, we obviously asked the question of how many. What areas are you responsible for? Is this question? What areas of resilience are you responsible for doing that testing in? So we've got a good mix going here. Business continuity seems to be the highest number so far, with a good Mandy. I'm seeing a good combo of all the above.
About a fourth.
Yeah, and so between a fourth and the 47%, we've got a big chunk of it covered, of course. Interesting that a small bunch, what I'm seeing, smaller pieces of IT, cyber, and crisis. Mm-hmm. That's a little bit interesting to me that we would see those numbers like that when there's the all of above. But I think this is really indicative of what we expected. And so thank you, audience, thank you, team, for giving us that information. Let's move on to the next slide, and Mandy's going to go through, and we're going to talk a bit about how scenario testing and uses of technology and a number of things that we hope will make it beneficial for you to take away, how to improve and how to really do your testing smarter. As a part of that, I want to set the stage for some definitions so that as we're talking and as we're saying, we are on the same page. So let's start with the word event, or the concept of an event. Really, that's the concept of a planned or an unplanned occurrence that could potentially disrupt your business. It's possible that during this we'll use the word incident tied inside that concept of an event, but we're gonna try to keep our words straight. But it's easy for us to kind of connect that sometimes. Scenario is really an important deviation, because we're talking about putting a box around something or defining a story and putting things into that box or into that story. And what we've captured here is the idea of the specific parameters of your organization, like what site might have all of these applications or all these processes or business services. Looking at it from the business service or business function perspective, that might be a scenario. Looking at it from a hurricane event or a storm event or a power outage event, what is the story that you're telling? What's the box that you're putting around this and explaining to your audience, your team, what you're testing for? That's the definition that we would place on scenario. And you realize, by the way, I gave variations just then, so keep that part in mind. And then, of course, the validation step. The term validation, we will sometimes use the word test. We might use the word exercise, but in the context, we're thinking in terms of we've got a strategy. We've defined a scenario for which we're going to test that strategy, and then we go validate it. Sounds kind of simple way to describe it, but I have to be honest, that's an area that we tend to need to be sure we are talking the same language as we go across. So with that, I think what we'd like to do is, Mandy, let me turn it over to you to talk through the phases and the details.
Yeah, absolutely. So Just to kind of set the stage here, well, it might look different for many organizations. These are kind of the most widely adopted and what we're going to speak on phases of scenario testing. And you can kind of see that this is a chronological story. So we're starting with identifying and building those scenarios. What are we going to test against and how are we tying that to our data? And like David said, what is the box that we're putting around that event? Then we're going to be able to get into testing, particularly we're going to be talking a little bit about tabletops today as well. But once you've built that scenario, let's test it. From there, we're not just talking about testing and saying we did the test. We're really verifying that what you expected is working, as well as addressing any of the gaps that you've uncovered and those vulnerabilities. And then finally, of course, evaluating the performance and being able to report it to your board, to stakeholders, to your executives. And then throughout all of these, right, we're going to talk a little bit about why these are all very difficult things to do, especially as time goes on and the technology gets more complex. But we also, for each of these stages, want to reframe how they can be adapted with AI and data science to address a lot of those challenges. But first, we're going to jump quick into a poll. So we're going to be talking a lot about challenges. So we're wondering for you all what the biggest pain you experience with varying testing events. You can kind of see here, they're a little bit organized by those phases, but a lot of the times it's knowing what even makes sense to test for my organization. Maybe we're just kind of repeating and trying to assess for something that happened in the past. Maybe we're just trying to do what we see our peers doing. A lot of the time, building and scoping a scenario being really difficult because there's so many complex interdependencies. Getting that engagement right now seems to be, it's jumping back and forth a little bit. For a second there, it was in I'd say in the lead, getting engagement for a tabletop, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But then also just the lack of time and resources. And honestly, lack of time and resources kind of rolls up to these previous three too. So it's not a huge surprise that these are somewhat evenly split, but a little bit more complex as we're getting down that list a bit. And the great thing to test is it seems like obviously among the audience, about 100 people have answered. We've got kind of hopefully some solutions on the AI and data science here. So it seems like it's leveling out a bit. So with almost pretty much tied getting engagement and lack of time and resources. And again, engagement can do with the personnel resources that you have as well. So thank you all for sharing your feedback there. We'll kind of keep it open and going, but really insightful, and hopefully we can kind of provide some solutions for you here. So we are going to start with talking about identifying and building the scenarios. So this is just, David's talking about the events here. We're talking about, let's determine the severe but plausible events that may disrupt your organization, and then tie that to your actual organizational data, put it in the context of your business. So a lot of the times the idea for what should I test against, those can come from threat intelligence feed, BIAs, risk registers, or like we mentioned, past incidents. So that might be kind of what you're drawing from when you're thinking about what even makes sense to test against. And these can range from very highly probable, just kind of a more localized event, to a kind of more complex crises that is maybe a world event and it's cascading across multiple locations and servers, etc. What we're seeing here, it can be very, very difficult to know this. And part of it is because the threat landscape is evolving as technology is evolving, and cyber criminal activity and other kind of everything is changing, and organizations are becoming more and more complex, right? It means that the scenarios that you're testing over and over, if you're not able to kind of pull in all of that data, can be outdated. And so what you believe you're exposed to might not be actually accurate to real world. What is my exposed to? What should I be testing against? Then the next thing is, and these kind of all flow together, right, is that disconnected data. So if your data is siloed, across applications, across platforms, or it's not really integrated or updated, it's really hard to get a real-time view of what your risks are and severity, particularly, if you're chasing down data via email and trying to update that. And then the minute that something is printed off, it's out of date because things are always changing. So that can be very, very tricky to do. Which kind of leads again into scoping, right? When you're onboarding new systems and retiring and making new processes, what was critical to you delivering your product and service might change. And what is a key part of being able to do that can also change. And if you're scoping kind of like with old processes and those things, it's going to be hard to identify what is critical and make sure you're testing around those things. Leading into kind of this comfort bias, right? So if we're reusing familiar scenarios or we're just going past it, over past incidents, sorry, it could be more retrospective instead of proactive. Like what has kind of maybe affected us in the past, but now things are changing. We're still testing for those scenarios. And additionally, there can be this idea that you do really want to validate your ability to respond, but we shouldn't necessarily be always testing to get gold stars. We want to be sure that we're testing to break. We want to see where things are vulnerable. We really want to push the limits and make sure that we can find those vulnerabilities so that we're addressing them proactively instead of in a disaster. And then, as we know, and this is going to be pretty much through all of the steps of this testing cycle, is the resource and testing intensity. So even knowing what makes sense to test or having the correct documentation, all of those things require a lot of people and require a lot of time and a lot of documentation. So a lot of the times, and like I said, a recurrent theme across all of these is that if you're getting really bogged down in the administrative tasks that are required of doing testing, you're not really being freed up to be strategic or proactive here. So shifting then into this same phase of testing, but how can we think of a lot of the times I think, we're getting more and more familiar with AI or generative AI. But when we're thinking about applying it towards resilience, it offers a lot more of a larger world of what it can do. So AI in particular can continuously be pulling that data from across your business, right? AI can really help with integrating or ingesting data from different systems and bringing it into one place so that when you're scoping for a scenario or in creating that, you know that you have the most up-to-date info and processes, etc. It allows your scoping to be a lot more dynamic. Your organization is dynamic, but the way that you're creating scenarios might not yet be, or the way that you have your data might not be dynamic, and that is going to create a misalignment. So the way that AI can help is that when something changes, right? And this is also true just around having like the latest technology in your testing practice, is that when something changes, it can automatically kind of update it across your system so that if it's updated in one place, it's getting changed and updated in the other place. AI and data science is also really, really great with testing because it's able to be an objective party. And so that kind of the vulnerability data that you're getting from one team, or that since it's being data driven and not sort of opinion driven, that it is really exposing the vulnerabilities that you have kind of without the human bias or tendency to kind of protect. And it can be an impartial player in your testing program. And I think that's something that is really appealing to executives and is very, very helpful because you want to be realistic instead of necessarily comfortable. And then automating the manual tasks, as I mentioned, and this really does apply to all of the stages of scenario testing here. But when you have the data gathering and mapping your data, ultimately, there are so many complex interdependencies across everything you do. So being able to gather that and kind of harness it means that you're not spending time tracking things down. You're able to be more of a strategic advisor. And that means that you're able to actually create more scenarios, particularly if you're doing AI scenario generation, which does exist, right? You're able to, instead of taking weeks to scope and create a scenario, you can do that truly in seconds. And that can take a huge burden off of you and allow you to test more scenarios more quickly. So now that we're kind of introducing the idea of AI here, just wanted to take our last poll here, that how does your organization feel about the implementation of AI tools, specifically for testing? Something that's really, really interesting is this flavor of question. Even in the past year and a half, I've asked this question a lot of times to a lot of different audiences. And it's changed so dramatically, where even a year and a half ago, I would say that the majority of people were not allowed to use AI at all. And now to see that 45% of people so far already use it is a pretty incredible change. David, I don't know if that's pretty consistent with what you've been seeing as well.
Yeah, this number is consistent. It's a little bit. I'm seeing it. I guess I'm kind of reacting just a little bit to 50. I'm seeing 50 to 70% people doing something, using it in
Yep.
some fashion. And this poll indicates about 50 are using it, with the rest of them in some manner of thinking about it or no kind of perspective.
Yeah.
Um,
It looks kind of combined around 37% here. Are they interested, or they're looking into it, but they need to learn more, or they need to find the right application. And so it could be, that's kind of hopefully what we're giving you some solutions for today as well, is that generative AI is not just kind of, it's not just ChatGPT, it's not just making those kinds of things. And well, that can be really helpful. It can also be incredibly powerful tool in your testing regime. So yeah, pretty a dynamic change. And that just kind of also goes to show, when we're talking about complexity and the changing risk landscape and your organization changing dynamically, just even in a year and a half, the amount of change that we've seen from AI and the amount of people adopting it more and finding more use cases specifically to continuity and ITDR is, it's really important to be able to keep up with those changes and understand how it's affecting your business here. So thank you again for your feedback here in the poll. So we're going to jump into the next phase of
Mandy,
scenario testing.
I apologize
Yeah,
just for 1 second. As the team, we're going, you guys are putting in some chat questions, and I appreciate that.
Oh.
Keep it up. I'm gonna, every now and then, I'm gonna try to answer some. And Mandy, there's a couple that we'll handle later. I want to handle openly later. So I just
Great.
wanted to acknowledge that to the team that's out here. So again, got questions along the way, put them in where you think they might be relevant, and we'll try to keep up with them and be prepared to give them all a good answer, either in chat or live when we get there. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you, Mandy.
great.
Sorry
Yeah,
for
jump in
interrupting.
anytime, because I'm sharing, so I'm not quite seeing what's going on. So thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. So the next phase of scenario testing, aptly named testing scenarios. So this is really when you are testing those decisions, roles, and your responses. You're getting the muscle memory, you're going through it. That can take a lot of forms, testing, and David had kind of talked about those a little earlier as well. A lot of what we're kind of focusing on here is the tabletop exercises. So tabletop exercises are these kind of quote unquote in person, or at least everybody in a round table being able to work through those decision points. It's truly almost a role playing exercise. Like while you are testing those things, you're sitting around saying, what if this happened next? What if this happened next? What would we do about it? Making those decisions. And something about that is this is a huge time and resource investment. I think we've seen figures that it can cost around $30,000 to $50,000 just to run a single tabletop exercise. And that's in those kind of salaried hours. And that's not even including if you're using a third party to facilitate your tabletop. So again, not only is it a huge time and resource use, But with that kind of investment that you're making, you want to make sure that you're the most prepared, that the scenarios that you're testing are relevant, etc. And so these are a really big deal, and they're not really going anywhere. But it's really important to be able to do that. Similar to the previous slide as well, it's those complex ecosystems. So now we're trying to scope all of those things, right? And so when we're understanding what happens next, understanding the impact of a part of an event can be really difficult if you're not able to visualize those downstream dependencies, or if you're not really able to see in one place the interconnectivity of all of your data. That means that the scenarios you're making can get like a little more simplified and leave gaps instead of being as robust as they can be and true to life. Again, being able to explore so many variations of the scenarios, the kind of what if is limited by your imagination. And then typically we're seeing the underutilization of quantitative data. So what we mean by that is a lot of the times, especially in a tabletop, right, the narratives and what's going on, it's relying on opinion and judgment and those narratives. Well, incredibly important, like we do not want to downplay the importance of that qualitative data, but we want to make sure that it is reflective of all of the data that you have in your system. And so we want to introduce more of that data-driven response, data-driven conversation. And this is a huge part where AI and data science can play a role. So we talked about in the previous phase, right? It can help you generate and scope those scenarios almost instantaneously. When we're looking at AI, it can actually act as a little bit of an adversary, right? So instead of this personal imagination of what might happen, AI can add the pressure with injects, it can track responses. It also just makes everything a lot easier. This isn't explicitly stated, but like as you're going along in your tabletop, it's recording every single step of the way, every single issue. And it's also really important then that you are exercising in the same place that you would be facilitating a recovery in. And so it's really nice to be able to have all of that data in one place that AI can surface and bring together. Data science as well. So one of the things we're seeing is in a tabletop, right, you're kind of following a single thread of a scenario. This is one scenario. Here's one way it could go and how we're going to deal with that. Data science can actually take that to an entirely new level with, for example, Monte Carlo simulations. So instead of sitting around a table and kind of talking through a single permutation, what this data simulation can do is run thousands of permutations of a single scenario. So what's that's doing, it's saying, okay, we ran this 1,000 times, and 87% of the time, this one vulnerability was what kind of caused you to exceed your threshold. So maybe what you need to do is focus on this vulnerability, fix the gap here, and then go back and test again. So now what that means is when you're showing up to a tabletop, you're saying this isn't just something that could happen. You're saying I have a data-driven simulation that has told me that this is something that we're able to prioritize. So now you're showing up to all of those tabletops prepared, and you know that the thing you're testing is actually incredibly relevant and incredibly important to your business. With that kind of gets into that prioritization, right? It's pointing and drawing out the riskiest vulnerabilities that you have that will not only, and not even in the point of this is going to be the longest amount of downtime, because you can have things that have downtime, but it's, the coffee maker. Well, important, maybe, not that you're necessarily having that, but you kind of get the gist, right? Even if it's not the biggest downtime, there are things that even if it's shorter, it's going to have a significant impact on your ability to deliver your product or service to your customers. So data simulations can really help prioritize not just by time or money, but by that business impact. And that's really important too when you're showing up to these tabletops, which brings us to the next point, is that human-led scenario testing, those tabletops, everybody getting together, that we don't really see that going anywhere. AI and data science are really there to supplement and augment and make the best use of those tabletops that you're doing, right? They will always kind of probably be required. It's in the foreseeable future from regulators. And there's that kind of personal quality of going through that, technology is never going to replicate. But what it can do, again, it can allow you to test a lot more with a lot less resources. It can allow you to make the best use of the kind of in-person things that you are doing. From there, right, we've kind of talked into the next phase, which is verifying and addressing the gaps in the vulnerabilities, right? So ideally, whether you're doing just kind of human-led testing or this technology-based testing, you want to be able to highlight the vulnerabilities that you have and be able to address those proactively. And that's not just flagging issues, right? Like we found these issues, you want to be able to make meaningful improvements. And so what that looks like is documenting outcomes, issues, and vulnerabilities, trying to identify areas for improvement, and also creating that prioritized list of fixes for amending. This is probably one of the most difficult parts of the phase of the kind of the life cycle here. One of the things is that reluctance to highlight failure. We kind of talked about like it can be difficult to say like, hey, these are my team's largest vulnerabilities. And so when we're kind of finding issues during a test, there can be a tendency to downplay the severity of a particular issue, or maybe just not even understanding the full weight of what an impact like that might mean. So that means that the reports might not be as accurate, and that's a missed opportunity for really being able to improve your resilience posture. Once again, kind of across all of them is the limited resources. And in this particular context, you can flag all of the issues and really identify what's important, but it's a cross-functional effort, and really it takes a village to try to amend these because it's across probably multiple teams, multiple systems. But when, once the test is over, everybody still has their entire job function to be able to do. So it can be really hard to prioritize amending those. It can be unresolved. And that means that the test that you're running and spending a lot of time and resource doing is not providing the full value because the follow-up isn't as accessible. And again, because of that complex remediation, the issues that you're experiencing are not isolated to one area, right? They're across ownership, they're across systems. It can make it really hard to know, who's owning the improvements and how are we going to resolve this. So, and as much as it is one of the hardest parts of the life cycle, it is also one of like the strongest places that AI can really help with that deep analysis. One of the best things I will reiterate is that it is an objective party here. It's able to review the responses, spot the gaps and delays in all of the issues, and it's able to surface those with no sort of bias or opinion, which means that you can really focus on those greatest vulnerabilities. This really goes hand in hand with the previous AI slide that we went with. Like if you're having a data-driven simulation, it's greater to know that, okay, again, 85% of the time it's this thing. So objectively, the data has shown me this is something I really do need to focus on. Also with AI, you're recording every step of the way, right? It's creating the analysis and allowing you to follow through, which means that all of your tests are no longer isolated from each other. You're creating a feedback loop between your scenario test and your verification, right? So that is leading into what you're testing. And so now your testing program, instead of kind of an isolated here or there, it's becoming a machine that is powered by itself, and it's feeding in, and everything you're doing is really prioritized. And because of that, you're actually able to go and say like, hey, this is the results of the testing, and this is how we're improving. This is how many issues we've had. And this is kind of like how we're remediating, and AI can help with that analysis. And then because of that, right, that means that you're fixing these issues faster. With all the data connected, it's able to suggest the corrective actions for you. It's able to immediately tell you, what data specifically do you look at, not just kind of objectively or subjectively kind of saying maybe this is an area of improvement. It's telling you which data to go in, maybe what information you're missing, et cetera. And then it's able to highlight those recurring issues. So let's say you're running enough simulations, then your simulations then are able to say, hey, across the thousands of permutations across several scenarios, we're seeing that scenarios that are generally related to weather are something that you struggle the most with, just as an example. So it's able to really harness the power of technology to collate all of your results. And so finally, kind of, this is a little bit more of a review as you're going back through your process. It's just formalizing and sharing those results, right? You need to be able to prove the value of your particular discipline and of your testing program. So what this is involving is, reporting and metrics that is summarizing all of the findings, all the actions you did, the timelines, and that's just for any sort of stakeholder, like an executive, a committee, and especially regulators. The outcomes are mapped to either the goals that they had or frameworks. And you need to be able to turn the lessons that you have into continuous improvement, something that we'll kind of reiterate over and over here. But it's so hard with the sheer amount of data, activity, teams, scenarios, all of those things to be able to report. How are you summarizing all of this? How are you getting all of the insights out of the thing? Okay, I've done all of these activities. What did I learn from that? Because of the sheer volume of time and people required, the evaluating and reporting performance can kind of be of like a check the box activity. It can be a little bit more of a wrap up. Okay, we did all the things. Here we did. Here you go. And instead of trying to ask and answer crucial questions about the impact, right? Like, what are we prepared to do for this? Are we prepared if this sort of threat increases or changes? Where do our greatest vulnerabilities lie? Things that people, kind of the outcome of your testing, you need to be able to those answer questions instead of just saying, yeah, I did it. And then that lack of the data-driven analysis means that when we're doing the reporting, we're thinking more like, this happened, X, Y, and Z, and it was really difficult to do this, instead of being able to link the data and the actual business outcome to the activities that you did. So the way that AI and data science can help with us is in that kind of reporting, being able to, what AI is really, really good at is taking a huge amount of data and analyzing it and being able to collate it. And like, it's not just creating a report, right? It's actually making those connections across all of the activities that you're doing, which means that now you're not just doing a check the box activity. What you're doing is that your team is now able to report and say, we found this error, we found this vulnerability, we were able to fix it. Here is all of the data that supports that. Here's everything that we did. And so now you're actually a trusted member and kind of a trusted facilitator of resilience, instead of just kind of bogged down in the admin there. And now it's not just a compliance task, right? Now you're saying my testing program isn't just we're required to test, so we test. It is, like I mentioned before, it is a continuous machine that is iterating upon itself and making you more and more prepared and more confident to step into a disaster and know that you have kind of anticipated it already. And so just kind of overall, making the AI and data science can drastically transform your program. It's incredibly important to look into. It allows for faster testing, better preparation, better use of the resources that you are actually already investing as an organization. Taking that 1 to 5 tests a year and, exponentially increasing those kinds of tests, and then making the human-led testing a lot more data-driven, making your organization a lot more adaptive. So I believe here is where I'm going to toss it back over to David, who's going to kind of wrap it up and talk a little bit more about data.
Yeah, thank you, Mandy, and you appreciate all of the details that we went through there and the questions that have been rolling through. What I want to do is I'm going to walk through these just a little bit and answer some of the questions while I'm trying to walk through here as an example. So, fundamentally, as Mandy said, we're communicating this in 4 phases. The concept of first identifying and building a scenario. In pre-AI and a simulation kind of day, we would do this by imagining what might be the scenario, imagining a story that we think we might want to exercise. and create a story, document a story, spend a half a day, and I'm doing this from experience, defining what that story looks like, and then thinking of places in that story where we might have somebody do something, inject or take a particular person out during the exercise because, in this event they are no longer around. So that's the way we would do it pre this technology opportunity. Today, using AI and data simulation concepts, we can actually um, uh, give the system the ability, give it a high level scenario, like I'm going to lose this area, northeast, this area or these sites. Give me a realistic example. Give me a realistic scenario that would cause this to happen and some possible injects. AI, in my experience doing it, AI uh, has the opportunity to go actually look in history and find something that happened legitimately in your area with the explanation of what happened in the area, building a nice picture and story of that situation. And then, of course, now I've got all the components included. So I'll put realism and realistic kind of, and obviously it's plausible because it potentially happened that way, along with the development. Some of you put this in the chat, but the development of injects and the opportunity to paint picture of when to say things, when to add things, when to move things out. And so, I mean, that takes a huge amount of time off of the process, planning the event, putting the order in place, putting the agenda of the event in place. All that can be accomplished using an AI type tool. And so that'd be an example. Another example is, let me see, and I'm doing this a little bit on the fly, but another example that Mandy, you mentioned, is the concept of doing data simulation, regenerative data, not regenerative, but data simulations to spin the top, if you will, do Monte Carlo type testing to figure out 87% of the time, this particular area is a single point of failure, or this particular area keeps coming into play. Everything we're doing keeps coming into play. And so you've identified that using some level of simulation. And now I go back and say, give me a scenario that would test that particular area. I'm seeing it. I've seen it multiple times now with clients. That concept of spinning the top, so to speak, and turning the knobs on all of the information that you have, and then say, okay, this area needs some exercising. Those are a couple of specific examples. I think in the chat, some people mentioned it, but the concept of, again, creating the details, creating the handouts, creating the order of the event, all of that is stuff that AI can help you with. So then the testing scenarios, I think we've covered that, but the concept of actually picking and validating takes me to doing the activity and running the test of the scenarios. In that example, I've overlapped myself a little, but we do that in a traditional manner where we put together some group to go do the activity and do the test. And we would use AI to help us record. For example, if you're traditionally using a call bridge, you could record that session. Recording that session gives the opportunity for the AI to capture all of the actions that you took place, all of the activities that took place, and create a really nice chronological order. Again, 40% of you are already doing this, it looks like, or at least similar. But I want to encourage all of you to think about this. The simplistic things we're describing are very valuable in the perspective of time frame and quality of what you get out. I'll do a side caution. When you always need to review what you've gotten. It clearly can make mistakes. It can clearly think up stuff that's not realistic. So obviously we need to review that, but don't let that get in your way of using it. Now moving on, verifying and addressing gaps and vulnerabilities. again, I'm looking back at, I've used those first two phases to really identify areas where I need to focus my attention. And particularly, that's part of where I've defined the testing. Also, as an output of the results, again, I've documented here, or excuse me, communicated that we can document what gaps we found during the exercise. We do that traditionally with notes, with information we've gathered during it, with things we've identified. Um, you will continue to do that, but AI can help you bring all that together in a really succinct manner and say, here's the four things that you said needs to take action later. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone through these things and missed those little details in the recap when AI really helps and has the ability to actually help you not miss those things. And then of course we've got this opportunity to improve our reporting and evaluating using AI. Those are things that it's really good at right now. There's stuff that's still progressing, but this is all stuff that AI and data simulation kind of models are really good at right now, and quite frankly, you really need to be taking advantage of it. Before I move to the next slide, I want to just make a couple of comments, and I'm paying attention to time here. Is that there was a question in the chat: how do you keep a closed loop? How do you ensure that your data is confidential? And I think it's really, I won't go into all the details here, but I want to make it clear that this is a misconception that can clearly be managed. And I want to describe it, is that at Fusion, for example, we use a foundation model where we teach it. We give it the information, we tell it what it can learn, and we give it permission to go get things. We use a retrieval augmented generation model, that's the term, but what that's saying is we allow it to go look in our SharePoint, to go look in our data repositories, to learn what we want it to learn. So when you use one of our tools, that's the way it functions. And every vendor that I'm aware of actually offers an enterprise kind of model that can have that kind of boundary on it, where it's not sharing your information to other people. It's using what you gave it to and what you allow it to see. For example, how broadly you allow it to go look through the internet and find answers, that is configurable. So the FUD, if you will, in the concept of Chat GPT and AI, is that anything you put in it, everybody else knows. That's not actually the way the technology is capable of working. And so I'd encourage you to go down that path. It takes the step of making it closed loop. It takes the step of setting it that way, but it can be done, and it's very powerful when you do it that way. And it does learn concepts and circumstances, but again, doesn't share those details with, at least ours doesn't. And again, it's a matter of how you get it set up and how you purchase it. And so I'd encourage you to go down that path as you work through this. So let's look at the next slide here, Mandy. We're kind of rocking and rolling here.
This is a bit of a review.
I think this one, as you said, is a bit of a review, so I'm probably not going to run through this one. I think at a very high level, I've communicated that you can do this much more effectively from a tech-enabled kind of opportunity, and I think I walked through all of those in the last little dissertation, right? And the final thing I want to articulate is really that you really have a data quality imperative here, that what you get out of a system using AI and data science is that it's really driven by the data that you give it and the data you allow it to see, and quite frankly, your data. And so it's quite frankly only going to be able to give you the quality of what you've given it. Now, I want to say that both on the positive side and on the negative side. On the negative side, it's pretty plain. If you don't have any data about gaps and areas of a vulnerability and risks, it's going to have a hard time finding specifics. So it'll get more general in giving you things that it interprets could be areas. So the more data you have, the more specific information you're going to be able to get in return. On the positive side, on the other side of the coin, I want to really encourage you to think about using it in a way that you can find where your data is missing and use the knowledge that it provides you and look at it and recognize, okay, if I had better data here, I'd get better output. And we're seeing tremendous benefits out of people not waiting until they get their data all right, but start using an AI and data science kind of approach, using that knowledge, using the information you get, using what you get out of it, and point at areas where I need to get my information more robust, more accurate, so that I can have better quality outcomes. I think that's it, Mandy. I think we're coming up on about 3 minutes, so we've got a few minutes for questions. I know that
I think that you've also answered kind of a few of these in the way too, because I think somebody at Dean had asked, how do you run a Monte Carlo testing with limited data resources and information? I think you kind of just answered that, right? Where it's something that can almost help you get ready for itself. It can point out those kind of data gaps, and then it can move into pointing out the vulnerabilities once you've put in those data. I'm looking, we've got a couple minutes here.
Yeah, let's
and
see.
I really appreciate everybody kind of chiming in the chat here, kind of back and forth, talking about what kind of testing they're doing. I don't know if there's anything particular to call out.
Yeah, let me throw out a couple things real quick. Is that there's a lot of questions in here about which products. Probably not gonna offer and recommend any specifics, but I will say you the main items out there in the industry. That they all have really solid value, and there's an importance in setting up the security and the rules at which you want it to learn from. So that I mentioned that earlier. It's important in all of these, you can give it information about you on a global basis and help put a box around where it goes, what it does, what it thinks, who you are. I'm an X kind of company. I focus on this kind of area. So all of them, if you go straight to one of the engines and you're a consumer, if you will, generically, that's what you look like. When you buy an enterprise version, when you set up an enterprise version, you could give it more description about what your profile is. And the data and the answers get cleaner. The answers get better because you have given it a better boundary around who you are and where you focus and all of that sort of thing. So I'd encourage you to think about that. Let's see. I think there's a couple comments in here, Mandy, on, it sometimes has bugs and gives you bad information. I mentioned that. That's true. And I don't believe it replaces people. I'm not suggesting that. I'm actually in the very strong opinion of augmentation here and using it in that fashion. As it says, I never want to create anything. I've created things before, but I never want to create anything and just send it out without looking at it. That's it's not there. I don't think it'll ever be there, but it's not there for me to it. But it does very much save a bunch of time in the things that we're doing.
Yeah, like you had mentioned, the kind of the data imperative there, right? Is that like it's very, very good at collating and summarizing, but ultimately, like that check is relying on you and your team to be able to provide, and also but then able to set up connections so that the most up-to-date information is available to whatever system that you're using. So making sure that you have the proper integrations or APIs or platforms that it's bringing everything together in one place, so that it is kind of feeding into your tool the most accurate data. I know we have just hit time here, and there might have been a few questions. let me put up our information. Thank you so much for attending today. And this is a topic we're really excited about. Thanks for your participation in the chat and the questions and the polls. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or David, and we could do our best to kind of answer. We're happy to answer anything that you might have on this topic or anything else, kind of to get you started if this is something that you're thinking about, making sure that you're kind of equipped with the knowledge that you need to kind of either pick the right tool or kind of get things set up. So we're here as a resource for you guys and really appreciate it. And so with that, thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you, Mandy. Thanks for the opportunity, guys. Talk to you guys soon.